Hello and welcome to episode 13. I hope everybody's doing well. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about ecology and economics and how they overlap, and how the natural rise of evolution has led to the system of capitalism as we know it. I think we'll focus on those two for now and see where it takes us. So, last episode we played with black pieces, so this week we play with white pieces. So we'll switch over. Okay. And let's go. Okay, so sociologically speaking, you could argue that people's culture develops from where they've been in life and what origins gave place to their happenstances. But oh my god, I really love to lag. Okay, well, we'll split with it and see what happens. Oh, hang on, it seems to be changing out. Bear with us, build with us, build with us. That should be alright. Okay, so an example I generally give here is one to do with fishing villages. So, for example, if you grew up by the seaside and one of your primary forms of nutrition came from seafood, then it's likely to impact you culturally because you've grown up with a different nutritional profile compared to, let's say, growing up in a mountain area where maybe, I don't know, mountain goats are a thing, maybe hunting goats is one of the primary forms of nutrition in that area, right? Simply because it's a different style of hunting, you produce a different style of culture as a result from it. So instead of having to, for instance, in a fishing village, craft boats, craft fishing poles, craft nets, and resource the materials to actively do all this, actively produce all these functions. Let's say if you're in the mountain village, you might instead have to develop bows and arrows, or camouflage, or spears. There's a lot more variables going on there compared to the boat, in the sense that you're hunting with arguably more intelligent prey. Generally, fish will just kind of swim where they swim and see a bit and take it. As far as I'm aware, most land mammals are reasonably savvy to hunters' behaviours. For example, could be antelope, it could be deer, even an elephant to some point has a savviness of what's going on in its surroundings. So, given that premise for the most likely evolution of different cultures, then I think to some extent it helps explain how more than just those cultures develop. So what would be the other ones? You have fishing villages, you have mountain villages, forest villages, or settlements in other words. I like rural villages. Desert villages. So let's use those four actions as our starter here. In the desert, your food sources might be much rarer, so the culture that develops might be more conservative as a consequence of that, especially considering water sources are likely much more scarce as well. So a desert culture might be conservative comparatively. If we use that as like a baseline of conservative and work from there. And then consequently to that, you'd have, let's say, a forest village, which resource-wise is going to have far more lumber. When I say forest village, I mean like like Fontainebleau kind of forest or New Forest, or there's no shortage anywhere of wood compared to perhaps a fishing village, the mountain village and the seaside village. They might have trees around to function, build weapons and build boats, seacraft. At the same time, it's not the same abundance. So the technological advancements possible in a forest-based village are likely to happen at an accelerated rate. And for some reason, the Bavarian forest is coming to mind. Because globally, Europe did quite well technology-wise. Asia did a lot technology-wise. I don't know how tree-dense or forestry-dense Asia is comparatively to Europe. But then you also have the rainforest in South America. It's interesting. There's definitely more variables to account for. I'm just trying to, get that ball rolling and understand the momentum of it. So, desert villages, forest villages, then you have mountain villages, and you have to account for the altitudes of it. Because the seaside village is obviously going to have lower altitudes, so probably more oxygen-rich air, which, at a biological level, is going to affect genotypes, and genotypes eventually affect phenotypes. So you could argue the higher altitude your tribe or village. Tribe, village? Or village, tribe. I like tribe. I like tribal practice. Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you're living in a village at the top of a mountain, the air is thinner, so your lungs have to work harder. So you probably develop a slightly stronger heart and lungs as a physical necessity to compensate for the lack of oxygen. Combine that with the physicality of, I'm using an example, I might be entirely wrong, the food sourcing for meat is likely to be hunting instead of fishing, which I would argue is more physically taxing. Physically arduous. So forestry, and let's say flatland, forest village, if you're hunting a forest, for instance like a tiger does, then the idea of camouflage might be a thing. The idea of awareness underfoot when hunting, which in mountain people probably have some things. In the forest you have various sticks and whatnot, and in the mountains you have stones. So that awareness of physicality, is it proprioception? It might be proprioception. I'll have to check the definition on that, but proprioception is that sense of touch. So I go with kinesthetic awareness in the sense of like where your balance is, conceptually and making sense. Okay, so in the desert, technology-wise, the resources available, whilst plenty of sand to start making computers, if you've not got any infrastructure connected to yours first, where do you resource the rest of it? Because you're likely to have to probably resort to stone. Well, it's not. You wouldn't live in the desert though, would you? You'd live adjacent to the desert. You'd probably try to get as far away from the desert as you reasonably could, or at least as far away as until you found something like a forest or a seaside. So, why would you stay in the desert? Would you stay in the desert? The immediate example that's coming to mind is Egypt. So, for example, there's plenty of very successful stuff out there. They use stone to build most of their stuff. They also developed papyrus. So clearly, in those very arid environments, there's resources around. The technologies that developed were clearly. I mean, the Egyptians were pretty advanced for what they were doing. They're pretty advanced, like pyramids and Sphinx with pyramids and Sphinx. Something else I was quite interesting. Technological marvels, especially when there wasn't electricity available, as far as we know. Okay. between those four, you start developing different genotypes as a result of activities undertaken, nutritional profile, and resources available for technological development. Combine that with environmental impact of air quality, water quality. Because I imagine desert air compared to forest, and forest air can be hugely oxygen rich. Mountain air can be very oxygen thin. Desert and seaside air are likely to be, I don't know if they'll be lower quality air, but it's definitely different. The thing is though, objectively, it depends what you're looking to produce from the genotype production or reproduction. Yeah, it's hard to say whether the air quality is higher or lower among those areas without actually doing testing on it. The fact of the matter is it's different, so it might be the lung capacity is stronger somewhere else because they've had to work hard to breathe the air, but then the oxygen richness in, for example, the forest means that whilst they might have slightly weaker physicality, they have never been oxygen starved, so perhaps, I know the brain needs oxygen to survive, but it's possible. I mean, I don't know if it would make them smarter, but I know it would do something different. Okay, so then the capitalistic idea in evolution of survival of the fittest is the other topic I want to talk about. And the basis of that is simply that survival of the fittest is like life isn't meant to be fair, nature isn't fair, none of it. Like the idea of fair in the egalitarian sense that's described in the modern society we inhabit is not how nature has ever worked or probably will ever work. It's not meant to be fair in the sense of equity, it's meant to be fair in the sense of you get in, you get out of it. If you hunt for a meal, you might not even guarantee the meal. You will have to work for it. You don't get to just turn up to the hunt, run along with everybody else and get fed unless you are a cub that's learning to hunt. And even then, you're still expected to pull your weight to some regard as quickly as possible, as soon as. What do you mean? The tricky part is, whilst I find the topic fascinating, it's where do I want to take the topic? Because I'm trying to find a way to link it into my algorithm theory. And the reason I'm doing it via an anthropological study of cultural development is because I feel that's basically finding not source code, the previous iterations of code which affect the current iteration. So, for example, if you find out what your grandparents did for a living and then your great-great-grandparents did for a living, those sort of things genetically are very unlikely to have a massive effect on you now. However, phenotypically will have had an effect. So in 1,000 years, if it was a family business, let's say, I know my grandfather was a soldier during World War II. So if all of my ancestors were soldiers as well, it's likely we develop killer instinct, if that's a technically accurate term. The idea of a killer instinct in the sense of you'd be able to identify weaknesses in perceived opposition. The thing is that, like, if you've been through a war, you develop more than just a sense of how to kill somebody. There'd be the idea of by any means, at all costs, by any means necessary. It's that concept of survival of the fittest actually does kind of overlap there. In a way, you could almost argue war is bear with us with this. Yeah, build with us on this idea. War is the ultimate capitalistic expression because it's every man for himself trying their best to be the survivor. And then eventually it's a team against a team, which you could argue is a duopoly, challenging each other to become a monopoly. Now, I don't know enough about the executive responsibilities that, you know, CEO, CFO, CTO and all that go through with their jobs. And I'm not going to pretend to. It's fascinating and I'd love to learn more. The point I'm making is that it's quite common for people in those positions, and you know, generally business people, to refer to business in comparison to a war and use similar terminology. And I get that because it's a competitive environment, you want to win. Well, yeah, war probably is. It's hard to think of a more of a higher stakes version of competition than a war. You know, you hear it sometimes like price wars and stuff, and the use of emotional language by marketing professionals to elicit emotional responses. Because the more emotional the customer is, the more likely the customer is going to become a buyer, and then the more likely. No, wait, I might just confuse my terminology there. The more emotional you can make the customer, in a sense, it makes them more malleable. And I'm taking that as a quote from Andrew Bustamante in his description of aircraft for intelligence assets. If somebody is emotionally malleable, then they're easier to influence, they're easier to persuade to buy my product, not your product, buy our product, not their product. And that is essentially what business is all about. Whatever the product might be, whatever the service is, whatever the product or service might be, it's identifying what the emotional triggers within the customer are relevant to the problem you're trying to solve. So, say for instance, glass of water. Let's say it's a hot summer's day, they're very clearly very thirsty. It's not difficult to produce that. Is that coming from Twitch? I have something else to add over there. We can take the challenge, but we're not going to think in that way what's doing it, so we'll see what happens. What the challenge over there. Why not? Let's make our chest stream slightly more entertaining. Go. Okay. So I might not think it like quite as much through this years. Bear with us. The idea of war is an expression of capitalism. Continues the idea that war is the survival of the fittest in one of its purest forms. And the survival of the fittest is the natural state by which genes reproduce. Then you could argue competition is part of the natural state of being. And whilst collaborative efforts and cooperative efforts are very useful for developing society into more than just warring tribes, well, to some degree you could argue that by very human nature, war is a default state. Because if war is considered a default state, because that's kind of what humans do when they're having fun, is muck about and have fun, really. Very bold strategy you've got here. Natural state of capitalism has to balance the financial responsibility to the shareholders and the bondholders to some extent as well as in its modern day, there's an increasing. No, I'm not going to accept it. Come on, you. No. You mucked up, either resign or keep going. No, resign. The capitalistic state is an evolution of war. Yeah, because you. No. The capitalistic state is an evolution of ecological homeostasis, then infers that competition is a natural state for human beings. Would you? Yeah, I'm going to stop that. what I'm reading. I'm not reading, I'm thinking out loud. And you're actually watching my stream. That's very kind of you. Yeah, because there's an ecological evolution. That means there's a genetic necessity for reproduction to be competitive. That means there's genetic necessity to be competitive. That means competitive attributes are phenotypically represented in every population, which means regardless of which species you're referring to, or maybe she's often trying to get my attention. Anyway, regardless of what species you're referring to, whatever species you're referring to, it means that the current product is the best evolutionary status that branch of genealogy has been able to. I don't know if you can read the chat if anybody's watching this. He's asking if I'm reading something or if I'm schizophrenic, which is a false dichotomy of bait. Yeah, some people will just say that because they can't actually join in the conversation, so they just chat shit. I'm not trying to be, insulting, offensive, or rude when I say it, but it's like, why not ask a question about it? Oh, it's in the chat. If it's alright with you, I'm going to continue thinking out loud and respond to your messaging by speaking rather than typing, just so that way I can focus on what I'm doing and try not to derail my train of thought. And I'll read the messages as they come through. Well, it's up to you. How you stream is how you stream. I started this to start thinking out loud because thinking out loud is one of the ways I like figuring stuff out. It started off just as an idea because I liked the idea of streaming, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go, see what happens. And then as I got a bit more into it, I had more and more of the ideas that I enjoyed thinking about. And the ideas that I started enjoying thinking about, I started expressing more and more until eventually I got distracted from other stuff in life. So I've come back to it now because I'm using it as a study tool. So the reason I'm using it as a study tool is because I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of writing, and I figure between reading and writing every day, eventually it all adds up, and the information starts, merging into each other, and you see more of the everything and everything of it all. So to provide an example, I studied biology, psychology, and sociology for my diploma at college before starting marketing at university right now, and I find that those three fields overlap with each other really nicely, and the more you understand how one of them works, the more you can understand how the others work, because the biology produces the psychology, which then affects the sociology, and then if you think about it deeper, there's a chemistry level to it, which then affects the biology. So if you think about, how it all works at the various levels of it, it makes it more and more interesting to figure out. I mean, from my perspective, it makes it more interesting to figure out why the world works the way it does, because there are reasons the way the world works the way it does. So one thing I was trying to talk about earlier on is the balance of running a business between the financial side of it all and keeping the business alive, as well as the ecological, ecological side of it all. Sociological side, ecological side, social side. It gets described as corporate social responsibility, and what it essentially boils down to is people, like, for example, like anti-corporatism to do with sweatshops and whatnot, right? Not everybody likes sweatshops being part of how the world works, and yet, if you want to have your Adidas, your Nikes, your Reeboks, pick a poison, at the price that you're willing to pay for them, the labour costs have to be that low. And I'm not saying this is an endorsement of, which I think are very typically human rights violations. I'm not saying it in defence of that. I'm saying that's the price of it. Because otherwise, it's the same idea of like, whatever smartphone you got. It doesn't matter if it's an Android or an iPhone. If you don't want to pay what the actual cost would be, for example, the mining of the lithium and the other minerals that go into making it, if you're not willing to pay for all of those at the price that it would take for it to be manufactured in a quote-unquote first world country, a developed country, which might be 4 figures, it might even be 5 figures, considering how advanced systems are becoming now, then you have to accept the price you're paying is going to be, if you want that price to be lower, you have to accept that it's going to be made in a facility. For example, it's like one of those factories in China would actually put nets up to stop people jumping up and killing themselves. And it's kind of, nobody really wants to work in a place like that, unless they have to, which then infers that it's a necessity of those people. And I'm really not paying much attention to it because I'm speaking out loud, but you know, the way that goes. I'm actually surprised I'm doing this well. Yeah, there's a book I was reading recently called No Logo, which essentially dives into that whole idea, and they look at it from very much what's the word for it? That it's all entirely bad and we should completely stop all of these what's the word for it? Human rights violations. And it's okay, grand, well, how do you plan to do that? Because you can say stop doing it, and then it's like, well, how are you going to stop doing it? How are you going to replace it? Because then the economic factor that's going to result from that the economic factor that results from that is people aren't going to be able to afford the goods that you're charging them for. So if you price yourself out the market, your business dies. And well, it's probably one of the ways that business people think of it as a war. Yes, you can hold on. Is because if, let's say, Adidas wasn't willing to do what Nike does, that just means that Nike gets the market share that Adidas won't take. And it's the same idea with Reebok as well. Like, these businesses are willing to do things that you're not willing to do, so they're going to get the results that you're not going to get. And the simplest way to bring that, like, the simplest way I explain that is like, you work out, then you get out what you get in. If you want to do a pull-up, you need to train pull-ups. You don't get to go to the gym once and be able to do 10 pull-ups overnight and never go to the gym again. It's just not how that works. You have to keep maintaining whatever you're challenging yourself with. And if you're going to continuously challenge yourself to get better and better and better in whichever discipline you choose, whether that's, you know, speed, strength, power generation, you need to actually work at it. If you don't work at it, it's not going to get better. And it's the same idea. If you want the business to continue growing, you have to be willing to do the things that your competitors are willing to do, or at least find a way to counteract the behaviours the competitors are willing to do, so that you can maintain your business's livelihood. So there's an evolution of survival of fittest. Where's the connection between labour, environment, quality, and competitive genealogy? Because there's definitely an overlap there. Part of it is, well, you could say, for example, there might be some species that didn't care about being, as we depict aesthetic quality, pretty. For example, take big cats. If you look at a lion or a tiger or, you know, pick a cat, aesthetically, they all have some qualities in common, and they have other qualities that they don't. Compare that to perhaps like an anglerfish or a goblin shark. Traditionally, those creatures aren't considered aesthetically pleasing. However, they're still kind of cool. Like the way an anglerfish has evolved to have a light bulb coming out its head, or how a goblin shark's jaw will, like, I don't even know the right terminology for it, but basically it comes out of the front of its mouth and then comes back in. It's almost like, if you've seen the film Alien and there's a mouth within the alien, it's kind of like that. And I'm getting conscious I've just got another 3 minutes on the clock, so bear with mind with the goals. that aesthetic development, some species chose. Well, ultimately, the aesthetic choice is an aesthetic choice. It's not one way or the other of whether it's beautiful or not, because beauty is arguably subjective unless you're taking the idea of traditional symmetry to be what beauty is. I mean, that's how humans identify each other as attractive, and you could argue that anglerfish, as well as goblin sharks, as well as lions, as well as tigers, all have their own metrics of beauty that they compare within one species, right? So if they're all doing that, then lions will find a specific lion prettier than another lion, or a tiger prettier. All that part is trying not to get bogged down in what animals find pretty in each other. I mean, there's probably a market for that if you're into breeding. Anyway, yes, the simple fact of the matter is, genotypically they've evolved in a way where they were willing to do what it takes to keep their species afloat. So that might be that the anglerfish chose to sacrifice. And I would say lions are more majestic creatures than an anglerfish or a goblin shark. I think they're really cool, but I wouldn't mount them on my wall. I'd more likely mount a lion on the wall, or a tiger. So by my subjective definition of what an aesthetic animal is, then we're going to go with that for now. So if the evolution of big cats is something that's, if you want the big cat to be the product in the ecological market, then you have to be willing for the big cat to be a carnivore. It's in the same idea like people not wanting to know how the sausage is made. If you don't want to know what goes into the sausage, then you're pleading willful ignorance. It's in the same sense that there's plenty of makeup products that have kind of weird stuff in them. It's the one that I don't like makeup. It's just lying. It's just falsity. Trying to connect the strings of thoughts. Because there's definitely a way that those strings of thoughts have like connections before they go back to the main station. I mean, you've got to move the king at some point, you can. Yeah, thank you. Okay. There's definitely a link there between corporate social responsibility and ecological evolution of capitalism. It might be tricky to find, but it's definitely there. Also, if you like playing correspondence chess, I often play like the 14-day game, so that way, like if life gets busy, I've got like a week or so in between things. I'm happy to play that again. I'm not going to do a rematch right now because I want to focus on my train of thought stuff. Although, to be fair, if you want to play a longer time control, I'd be happy to, just so I can like delve into thoughts and not feel so rushed. Like time-wise, I could probably do a half-hour game at max. So yeah, if you want to, just send a challenge. Well, biologically speaking, do genes get to choose what genes they become? Because then that's arguably the deterministic free will question from psychology. Because in stem cell research, you can make stem cells become an organ gene or a skin gene or whatever else. The stem cell will adapt to the purpose it's given. So the question I'm finding for that is, do genes have a choice in how they become a gene? In the same way, like when you're born, you don't get much choice over who your parents are, who your siblings are, or anything else in those regards. However, as you get a bit older, you get a bit more choice over what clothes you wear, what foods you eat, what schools you attend, kind of, what workplaces you encounter, and then eventually, everything else in the world. The thing is, you're also working within the confines of the established system. So, say for example, you graduate, you get your doctorate from Cambridge or Harvard or Oxford or Yale, then you position yourself in the job market That's a higher standard than somebody who's only got an undergraduate degree from, I don't know, pick a less reputable university out. It sounds like I'm inviting trouble if I start insulting schools that I don't know the names of. Point stands is, those choices that you're given, they're within the confines of a system that encourages you to follow an educational pathway as a reward. You don't have to. It might be some people are better suited to starting a business, some people are better suited to following artistic or athletic pursuits, and like professional musicians and sports people, the academic profile wasn't for them. It's a choice thing, but then at the same time, the choices that they're making are by the constraints partially of their genetic profile. If you're really good at throwing a javelin, you're likely going to continue that, maybe go to the Olympic level. If you're much better at playing guitar, then it might be better suited that you focus on playing guitar and become a professional musician. If you're much better at, I don't know, let's say you're really into collecting animal samples, you find a bunch of insects, study them. Is it entomology? I think it's entomology. One of them's to do with study of eating insects, and I did a study on that for my consumer psychology major last year. It was kind of cool. It was alright. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, how much choice does a gene have and what kind of gene it becomes? In the same way, it's determinism versus free will. In the same way, how much choice do I have over the sort of man I become? Because if I follow the academic route consistently, then let's say for whatever reason I become a doctor, great, I've got a doctorate. It increases my employability in some regards. You could also argue it's counterproductive in the sense that, oh, he's a doctor, this is an entry-level position, blah, blah, blah. And then you could also argue that being in the academic system for that long means you get more networking possibilities and possibly have a get hired at a proportionally more advanced stage of the career process, if that's the correct bit. Yeah. Because some people choose to do things that they've got the natural strength for. So if that's your natural strength, you didn't choose your natural strength. You're choosing to make the most of your natural strength. An example coming to mind is Arnie. So, moved over to the US, became a bodybuilder. His natural strengths were apparently the work ethic to get that done and some pretty damn good genetics. Those biceps are, world famous for good reason. And then, after that, became an actor. And let's be fair, the qualities of a strong work ethic, things like being able to commit yourself to a specific diet and sleep schedule and all that stuff to optimize your performance and recovery, those are qualities that will translate very well into whichever career you're choosing to do. Whatever you choose to do, the idea of discipline is universally utilitarian. It just is. Now, the actual skill sets of being able to move weights in various angles and proportions, there might be some use to it in the acting world. However, they're not diametrically opposed, but they're very different skill sets. So he went for acting classes, and he learned to it. And at first, they told him several times he was too muscular to be an actor. And then he got to the point where, you've got Conan the Barbarian, you've got Terminator, you've got a bunch of films where he's a pretty damn big deal. He was one of the major action stars of his time. And after that, he then became... And I think, I want to make a very important note of this, is he immigrated to America at a time, well, let's be honest, compared to what the day we're on now, was, I don't know if xenophobe is the correct term, like in a strict phraseology? I don't know. Point sense, is people weren't as kind to people that didn't have American accents at the time. So the fact he was able to become governor of the state of California, as well as having been a world champion bodybuilder and a world famous actor, that is incredible. It's a very admirable man. There's very few people that could accomplish any one of those things, much less all three. And he did it before, I think, the age of 50, or around between 50 and 60. There are many people that get to their 70s or 80s and don't accomplish anything near to that. Which is why I'm saying the point, like, discipline and hard work really do, make that big difference. It's less about what you've got as your natural skill sets and what you nurture within yourself. Because your cognitive abilities might be your IQ might be capped at, I don't know, the world's highest IQ I've heard of was 220 something, which is Chris Langan. He's still very, very active in the scientific community. He's still very physically strong. Like, one of his interviews I saw, he has a power rack, and you can see he's got a big pair of shoulders on him. He knows how to work out. What that says to me is that just because you're genetically gifted in one area, for example, Arnie had the aesthetic appeal that people voted for in the Mr. Olympia contest. Chris Langan has obviously got the cerebral qualities that make him a world-leading scientist. These people are really capable of what they're doing, and yet they're not limiting themselves to a singular activity. Chris Langan does a scientific report, he also does a physical activity, he also works as a ranch hand. Like, being able to run a ranch is a very physically demanding job, which requires a lot of technical know-how that people really underestimate. You can say, oh, he's smart enough, you can learn all that stuff. Just because you have the capability to learn a thing doesn't mean you learn it overnight. It's not like you could pick up a book, read the entire thing cover to cover, then recite it and teach it at the PhD level. You actually have to apply yourself. In the same way, I'm getting a little bit off topic of reverse. More on the defense of discipline as a useful quality. But then that discipline is kind of how the human species perpetuates itself. You could argue discipline is synonymous with Freud's concept of sublimation, which is the redirection of sexual energy into constructing. I mean, it's been accounted many a time by many feminists that there are very, very phallic structures within the society we inhabit. And as society has become more egalitarian, I'm sure structures will start resembling other things amongst us. Point stands is the sublimation of sexual energy is actually a very useful quality for humans to do. That's not to say you need to become a celibate monk. It's to saying, like, if you follow yourself hedonistically with only ever considering sex as a reward, you can actually make that a really positive influence in your life. Because if you think about it in a more and more abstract fashion, you understand. It's kind of like, if you've heard of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, I like to define it as ratio-based sublimation. So if I have for example, if I wanted a glass of water, and I want to have a sip of my water, then I might obey my instinct and have a sip of the water straight away. Or I can think, I'm kind of thirsty. I could create that as a reward function. So instead of just having a sip of water whenever I'm thirsty, I could, what task was going to mind? For example, in studying, I could read a paragraph of a book, or I could take a note from a study point, or I could make my bed. You get the idea. Is you can do something for us, then you create a reward function. If you do that enough times, then let's say you create a ratio for it. So, for example, when I'm at the gym, I don't allow myself to sip my water mid-set. So, for example, today, if I did bench first, so after bench, I could have a sip of water before I start weighted chin-ups. Then I have to do all the weighted chin-ups before I can have another sip of my water. Then I do overpress. I have to do all the sets of overpress and so on. It's the same idea as like when I'm training at jiu-jitsu, I'll water before training starts, and I'll have it once I get off the mat. The only exception to that is if it's 30 plus degrees and my mouth is so dry that it's medically necessary. The idea is that you can discipline your mind to not become soft. The tougher you can make your mind, the more arduous an environment you can survive in. Similar to the idea I was describing earlier on about desert people. Because if you, I'm sorry, Libby, the computer does not like the moves you make here. They don't like mine very much either, but apparently between moves 15 and 20 we both mucked up a bit. And I don't know if you're still paying attention to this, but for your own sake, well, I'm interested. So your blunder, best move would have been move the rook over. And to counter your queen attack would have been for me to get the bishop. I remember seeing it like 2 minutes later. I think it's because I got focused on h7 to threatening checkmate. I looked at that instead of the alignment of the bishop with the queen. Okay, next up was Okay, so apparently you capturing the pawn on h6 was a blunder again, and your better idea was just to capture my hanging knight. Yeah. I should have got the bishop that point instead of capturing that one. Interesting. If we put that there, then what would happen? Apparently it'd be good for you to bring the rook over, and then I would bring the knight back, probably c. There we go. And you capture the pawn. Okay. Avert the position to what happened. So you capturing that pot? Yeah, because you should have caught the knight. I should have caught the knight. I did the sensible thing then your mistake was, yeah, because you're blocking the knight. Oh, that's good. Without blunder. Oh, to retreat the queen, because the queen was hanging and I'm the idiot in front of. What should you have done, Malcolm? You should have captured the queen. And I think that's one of the reasons we shouldn't talk during chess matches. Well, or all the more reason to improve our focus of talking during chess whilst against the computer. That's one of the reasons I play against the computer instead of humans whilst doing this. I mean, I'm happy to if you guys want to challenge me, then I'm more than happy to accept the challenges. Bear in mind, it might, I don't know if it would impair the quality of my thinking out loud. It would definitely affect it though. It might be more fun. But the reason I do it against the computer is just so I don't have the time controls, because that way I can go at my own pace, and if I've got a really interesting string of thought coming to mind, I don't have to worry about what's going on with the board. That was that. Yeah, I just thought that fork would score stronger than it did. Seller. Really? I thought it would be. Okay, because you wanted to attack that, but I thought maybe attacking the king was it still blockchain would be an idea. Your best move there would have been to bring the rook through, possibly because then you'd be able to move the knight and have it defended instead of me missing. I saw it in my head right there and just didn't correct myself during the actual game. What a twit. I'm not opposed to swearing, I'm just trying to expand my vocabulary a bit more, because sometimes when you're in public it's like, for example, if I'm at the climbing centre, there can be quite a few kids there. I tend to say, oh, bother, instead of saying, like, bollocks or whatnot. Just, there's like 6-year-olds, you don't really want to teach them those bad language much, entirely unnecessary. Or, parent your own kids, don't rely on others to do it for you. Oh, apparently your capture of the bishop is also a mistake. You should have brought that rook through again. Interesting that that rook to e1, by the time you did it, was what gave me that thought. Really just to catch a shot at that. Is it because I could then have moved the pawn afterwards? Because the way I see it is that if you do that... Oh no, hang on, because then c6 was covered by the pawn. Oh, there's someone here. Okay. Hello. Hello, Alex is a great. I'm doing well, thank you. Sorry, I don't often check the chat on the Twitch stream because I have an alternate screen which I can kind of show you very quickly. Basically, it's a behavioral conditioning tool I use during some of the workouts I do at home, because effectively, if you know much about the idea of hypnosis, is regardless of how deep you believe and it works actively, not yet. So we bring that there. I can hover this over it and you can kind of see what I mean. You can know. Anyway, basically it's a swirling motion with subliminal text in the background, which started off as an idea just out of curiosity to see what would happen, and then I thought, well, hang on, I could actually use that more and more utilitarian. I could get more utility out of it. So I started adding more and more things of like, basically the original thing was like good people do this, good people do that, and I thought, oh well, hang on, I can be more specific. And I've extended the script more and more, so it's like, I think they're all over 1,000 pages now. And with the updates I've got planned, I'll definitely go past 1,100. It's going to be a big thing. Yeah, I just find it's. I don't know if I can show it to you live on stream. Maybe there's a button for it. There's that one. There's this one. I'll do that. It shows you very briefly what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's got it on my screen. I don't know if I can show it to your screen. If anybody's actually paying attention to what I'm doing. Although I do appreciate viewers actually viewing is part of the fun. The reason it's taking a little bit slow is there's a bit of screen lag going on because of the running in the background. As far as I can tell, it's not showing up on your screen there, unless I drag that in here. If you guys can see that, then you get what I mean. I'm going to switch it back to the chest for now. But yeah, it basically scrolls around and shows subliminal messaging that I've scripted myself, and I do workouts whilst listening to motivational music in the background as a form of behavioural conditioning to make myself more disciplined. So if you're familiar with musicians like Akira the Don, Eric Thomas, I think his name might be, George the Speaker, Machiavelli Motivations, brilliant. Big shout out to all those people. Essentially, it's just, telling you to, instead of thinking or doing the thing, go do the thing, instead of, dilly-dallying with your life and not doing what you actually want to do with yourself. Go follow your dreams, accomplish your goals. Like, it's not that, it might not be easy, it is that simple. And that's the important part that I think a lot of people really need to get over, is if it was easy, everybody would be rock stars and, presidents and astronauts and all that kind of thing, right? To be world class is something, you have to realise that the entire world is your opposition. So, circling that back to what I was saying earlier about genotypes and phenotypes, and how ecology kind of evolves into capitalism. If you want to survive in the world full stop, yeah, you put in a fair amount of effort. I'm not saying anybody that's doing their best at their 9 to 5 isn't working, doesn't mean you're working hard. It might be hard for you, and what's hard for you is relative. For example, to continue the gym analogy from earlier on, if you've never exercised beyond walking to the fridge in your life, then yeah, going for even a 1 mile jog is going to be a challenge, and I'm not going to make you feel bad for that because you're putting in the work. But I can see visibly that you're panting and sweating and really making that effort. Why the hell am I going to mock you for that? You're doing literally the exact thing you should be doing to get better at that thing. In the same way, if it's your first day weightlifting and you can't even bench press the bar and you've got to start with dumbbells, why the hell would I take the piss out of you for that? Because that's the best you can do, so that's what you are doing to make yourself stronger. I admire that. And the same thing will go for reading. I mean, if for whatever reason the most complicated thing you could read was The Big Hungry Caterpillar, and you're struggling to get through every word, it might be dyslexia, it might be you're never exposed to literature, whatever that reason is, starting with a book at that quality, if that's what's difficult for you, that's what's difficult for you. You keep going with it, and it's just something I'm very passionate about. Is people actually making the effort to it instead of complaining about things. Because if you make the effort, you can actually accomplish stuff. And the best thing about it is, it's so much more satisfying because you know you've put in the effort. It doesn't feel like, okay, take jujitsu for example. There's a very old phrase which I'm sure is known in more circles than just martial arts and combat sports, is the master has failed more than the beginner has ever tried. And it's true. It really is true. There are going to be black belts and brown belts and purple belts that have been tapped out way more than I ever have as a blue belt. Simply because they've been in the game longer, and that's part of how they got to where they are. And there's a really good quote, which I think is Winston Churchill, and whatever you think of Churchill aside, the quote is brilliant, is that success is going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. So, okay, I lost, so what? You get back up and you go at it again. And it doesn't matter if it's athletics, or if it's academics, or if it's art, or anything else. It just, you get back up, you go at it, and you say, I don't care if that was embarrassing, and I don't care if my feelings got hurt, because my feelings are my feelings. Your feelings aren't there to help you win. Your feelings are there to help you stay alive. And that's a really significant difference I think that people need to learn. That tidbit I heard from one of Alex Hormoz's video, and he's right. Your feelings aren't there to help you win, they're there to help you survive. And the sooner people realize that your body isn't trying to make you the best at anything, it's just doing basically the bare minimum to keep you going, which means you're going to get bare minimum results. And yeah, if you work a little bit harder, you get a little bit better results. And then some people just stop and they get complacent and content, and it's sometimes like you work really hard and you need a rest. Sometimes that just genuinely happens. But the whole it might have been. I watched this video recently called Burnout is a Myth, and yeah, burnout is kind of exaggerated, and overtraining as a concept is exaggerated. You know if you're overtraining because rhabdomyolysis will kick in. If you genuinely think you're overtraining, you will be in such pain without doing things. You won't doubt it. You won't question it. You'll be like, oh shit, this is like, I'm getting like substantially weaker or whatever. Like, if you know the symptoms of overtraining, know the symptoms of overtraining. For me, the first indicator is if my mood gets to the point where like I can't respond to people's sense of humor without being agitated, then I know, okay, I need to breathe, apologize for whatever I might have said that was insulting or offensive or upsetting, whatever. If I have, even if they don't feel it was that big a deal, if I think it was out of character for me and was unnecessary, I'm going to damn well go apologize, and then make sure that the entire situation is rectified, and then solve my own problem. Okay, so maybe I need to sleep a few more hours next week. Maybe I just need to get better at handling my own emotions. Maybe that symptom of overtraining isn't actually overtraining. Maybe it's just me not being able to emotionally regulate myself. And that's a massive thing. It's taking accountability for all of it and taking responsibility for your emotions and how they affect everybody around you. Because ultimately, nobody can do that for you. You have to do that yourself. It's impossible to expect anybody else to control your emotions for you without going into full dominant submissive dynamic. And floats your boat, you carry on. Your sexual proclivities are not the point here. I'm using it as an example of basically willing subservience. If you're willing to give somebody else complete control of your life, then you have to actually do exactly as they're requesting of you, because that's what willing subservience is. And so if you want to get good at stuff, you have to work hard at stuff. So there's no rest for the wicked. We've all got bills to pay, we've all got mouths to feed, even if it's only our own. So money don't grow on trees. And whatever your, figurative word for money is, whether it's muscle gains, whether it's mind gain, like brain gains, like getting smarter stuff, whether it's getting the promotion at work, whether it's finishing an educational course and upskilling yourself, whether it's simply like breaking a PB for your 5K run, which I did Saturday morning and I'm a little bit happy about it, 23 minutes 59, which I don't know how good that is well classified. Good for me, I'm going to keep going with it. Like, if you want the result, you have to work as if that is the only thing you want. If you put in partial results, you get partial. Put in partial effort, you get partial results. If you can't let your expectations exceed your efforts, which again I think is Alex Hormozy. And I'm quite passionate about self-improvement, if that's not somewhat obvious to you guys, because I think regardless of which avenue of improvement you choose, I think it's good for you. I think it's good for the human spirit. And, you know, maybe it's just chess. Maybe chess is your thing and you want to get better at it. If you want to get better at chess, you need to study chess. You need to look at puzzles, you need to study master games, you need to do more than just play blitz games for 20 minutes once a week. You need to, you know, create a study plan. And if you don't know how to create a study plan, look it up. The vast majority of us have the internet connection. And if you don't have an internet connection and somehow are still hearing what I'm saying because somebody's downloaded it and shown it to you, then the principle I'm trying to make here is a study plan is however the hell you figure out how to get better. If you think, okay, this person is better and he does this, I'm going to look at their games and figure out how they do that and reverse map it. And the same with jiu-jitsu. Okay, I don't know the moves that they're doing to figure me out, but I'm going to figure out one specific thing that they do better than me and learn more about that. So then the next time they get me in that position, think, oh, that's how you do that. Ah, that's how I can defend that. Ah, that's how I can escape that. And it's not always going to happen immediately. Sometimes you get breakthroughs, yeah. Sometimes you're just grinding away and it's those little 0.1%. And then maybe that's all the gain you make that day. But by the end of the week, that's 0.7%. By the end of the month, that's 3%. And 3% is actually not nothing. That's a relatively decent return rate for a lot of stock portfolios, 3%. And if you're doing that across the year at 0.1% per day, that's 36.5% improvement. Think about whatever skill you're doing right now. If you could get 36.5% better at it in a year, you know, in 10 years, you're going to be nearly 4 times better at it than you were. And yet, you need to start. Yeah. As again, Alex Hormozy, stop thinking days, start thinking decades. If you think about that long-term stuff, like in a decade from now, what you want to get at, what would you start now? Go for it. The only person stopping you is you. And I don't know, I went through some life stuff in 2019, which has got me to the point like I don't like being mediocre anymore. I will accept my status in the hierarchy if I put my best effort into it. I've got to the point where there's a voice in my head that it's me speaking to me. You haven't worked as hard as you can do better at this. You can put in more effort. And it's part of the reason why I do this podcast is to hear myself think it loud and listen to how I speak about things. Because I've noticed before that when I'm playing well, I speak more confidently. You probably heard my voice in that match against Olivia there, game against Olivia there. There were moments where, for example, when she was attacking my king side, that my tone of my voice probably changed slightly. And noticing those little details like that, okay, what other aspects of your life can you listen to your body and find out those results? Whether it's your tone of voice, or whether it's an alteration in your body language, or whether it's the eye contact you're making. Where do you feel most confident, and where do you feel most insecure? Because if you can find that balance between those two, you're going to learn so much more about yourself and what you actually want to do with your life, as well as what you don't want to do with your life. Because sometimes the important thing isn't about what you're saying yes to, it's about what you're saying no to. In the same as like people that are, for example, sometimes like making friends, the first people you meet, you just kind of latch onto them. And sometimes it goes for like girlfriends as well, like, partners. Doesn't matter if it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, however you identify. Let's go with romantic partner, yeah. Whether it's a platonic friend or let's say platonic partner or romantic partner, right? Whichever way around that is, if he comes on a first come first serve, you might find one of the best friends you've ever had. It might be brilliant, and you talk to them about everything that goes on in your life, and you know that no matter what happens, if you phone them at 3:30 in the morning, it's going to be okay. Whatever the problem is, you're going to help them, or they're going to help you, and you'll figure it out and it'll be okay. Maybe not overnight, like everything else, you might have to work hard at it. It'll be alright. It will work out fine. And it's sometimes you meet people and you get along with them really quickly, and there's that chemistry to it, but there isn't much more to it. It's just chemistry. You realize that the relationship wasn't that deep, and that's fine. That's okay. Not every person you meet in your life is going to be this life-changingly important figure. However, sometimes, and I'm thinking of a recent relationship of mine, which I have talked about in previous episodes, so if anybody's a repeat watcher, then thank you very kindly. Point stands is that relationship taught me so much about relationships, and honestly, it broke my heart to have to break up with her. And I did feel bad about having to break her heart. However, ultimately, it was the best thing for both of us because I don't think that relationship would have survived the 10-year marker. I held on as long as I could, and I don't want to air her privacy as much as my privacy with all that there. Like, there were multiple reasons why it didn't work out. It was great for the first portion, and it fizzled. That happens, and it's just, if you stop letting yourself make mistakes, you'll start learning lessons. Stop thinking that it's a mistake. It doesn't matter. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity for growth. It's like that Churchill quote I said beforehand. Success is going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. Take chess, for example. If you have a game of chess where, sorry, the computer's lagging a bit. Let's say, for example, you're playing, if I'm playing against a computer and I reach my max out level, which is generally around the 1400-1500 marker, when I'm like uber focused and well rested, then if I play against that level until I'm absolutely exhausted every day for, let's say, 3 months, that's like around 90 days, let's say. If I play, let's say we get 6 games in a day, 6 or 7 games in a day is probably fairly feasible if I was doing nothing else to myself. Eventually I'm going to start understanding that computer's algorithm to the point where I can start understanding it a little bit better, even if it's not fully conscious. Some of my subconscious is going to recognize the patterns. It's just how the human brain works, even if it's only one pattern. And I can accelerate that pattern recognition process by doing a post-game analysis and making notes of it. If you want something, you can get it. It's not like anybody's stopping you. And I think on some level I have to figure out why that matters to me so much, because I think what upsets me about it is there's people I've met who I know have greater potential than what they've lived up to. And that genuinely upsets me, is to when I've met someone who is incredibly intelligent as well as beautifully kind and warm-hearted and deserves a better life than what I think they've gotten for themselves, I wish they'd worked harder. And I really hope for anybody that's listening now that if you need to hear this, then I'm happy to keep speaking about it. And if you don't feel you need to hear this, why do you feel that way? Because I've spoken about this sort of stuff before and followed these subjects and topics, and some people, I was saying about it, like, greatness can inspire you, it can intimidate you, or it can irritate you. And those tend to be the 3 main results. Is some people get inspired and, whoa, that guy did muscle up, like a clapping muscle up, I want to do that. And they go train harder. They start doing more pull-ups and start dips and focus on all these like technique things and go for it. Some people get intimidated. Oh wow, he can do a muscle up and I can't even do it. Well, I don't know, like a press up. Maybe I shouldn't even bother. It's like, no, stop it. Don't let other people's greatness scare you. There's nothing enlightening about shrinking away so that make other people feel good about themselves. And the third option, or the irritating thing, is most people have heard the idea of what a hater is. Yeah, haters are a thing. Some people will express envy and jealousy regarding your success. That's going to happen, and you can't let it stop you. Because if you let other people's emotions dictate your choice of actions, then they're choosing how your life is going, not you. And in some cases, this is a weird dichotomy to that, because if you're in, let's say, art and you want to get, it's the whole balance between, what's the phrase, artistic expression and show business. Because on some level, what you want to express artistically might not be the most palatable thing for the general public. And you've got to make a choice with that. And you have to accept that For example, some of the top musicians make music that they know is going to be successful when they, send it to the club. Some people make music they don't care if it gets in the club, they just want to make the music for themselves. And ultimately, I think those are the people that are happier as artists. I think that it's very easy to lie to yourself about what you think makes you happy. And I know myself that pushing myself hard by studying and training and working every day that I can. I study and train every day. I work most days. I'm a student right now, so I'm focused on studying and training, working enough to keep myself, I can afford my lifestyle. It just, I have made sacrifices to get here, and because the life I had beforehand, where I would just go to work, come home, or stay inclined. I used to just get stoned and like surf Reddit or whatever social media, scroll through something on television, might be Netflix, and that was it. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe once a month you need to actually blow up a little bit of steam to reduce stress. You don't need to do that for 3 or 4 hours every day. And if you think you do, I would say you're delusional. Genuinely, there's so much more to life, and people are just missing out on it. Some of them think they can't be bothered because they've been told by other people that they can't do things. You can do things. You are good at things. You're not as angry as you think you are. You're angry at yourself because you haven't done. You're not angry at the world. You're angry at yourself because you're not doing what you think you can contribute to the world. You're not anxious about anything. You're just scared that you might, okay, anxiety can be a thing. A lot of the time, people are anxious about what could go wrong rather than focusing on what can go right. Because sometimes you need to focus on the solutions, not the problems. And you're going to do much more for yourself by living life that way. Okay. Time-wise, I think we've done maybe an hour or so. That's a good place for now. I was expecting to climb the ladder a bit more on that, but to be honest, getting that live game request, I really enjoyed that. So if Olivia's still listening, thank you, Olivia. If anybody else is about, brilliant. Somebody in the chat just sent me a link to, I don't know what a .ly link is. Good for you. Risky cookies a day. Can't be reached, so I'm going to leave that there. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I have actually really enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed my exploration of ecology and economics overlapping with the evolution of capitalism, and how various tribes might have genotypically different production due to their environment, which then turns into phenotypes, which then develops a culture, which then creates the diverse cultures we have in the world today, as well as the thought experiment of comparison of evolutionary subjective aestheticism to corporate responsibility, because there's an idea there, and I don't mean to be callous when I say this, but there's a subjectivity to tolerance of work in an environment. Because let's say, for example, you're working in a sweatshop factory, it's pretty easy for humans to agree what is not a nice working environment. However, let's say, for example, you start getting paid minimum wage, you've got air conditioning and all that kind of stuff, alright, great. And then you upskill and you're in the same building, but maybe you're the manager and you're earning 3 times as much as all your employees. But you're still in that same work environment. And one day, you get another promotion, go to head office, and you realise, oh, it's nice here. You've got a coffee machine. Ooh, there's a juice bar. Ooh, there's free parking. And, whatever amenities right. Then maybe you climb the ladder at more. Maybe you start, having to move into London, you've got this high-rise building, there's more amenities, company car, dry cleans, you've got an assistant. Things that you start getting more and more accustomed to. I'm not saying the sweatshops aren't horrific. I haven't seen them in person. I'm basing this off reports. From what I understand, they can be pretty grim. I'm saying that quality of environment is a subjective thing, in the same way that aesthetic beauty can be considered a subjective thing. Like, some people are going to find anglerfish really attractive. Phrasing. Anglerfish, goblin sharks, what I would argue are less traditionally interesting, less traditionally majestic animals. They're really cool though, like just the way like goblin sharks, or like cookie cutter sharks. You know? Anyway, and then like lions and tigers, like the idea of beauty is perhaps is because we arguably perceive lions and tigers as more aesthetically majestic animals than anglerfish and goblin sharks, because their facial structure resembles that slightly more of a human. That's an idea there. Okay, I very much enjoyed this. Thank you everybody for watching and listening and participating however you did. I hope you have a wonderful week. Work hard, stay disciplined, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, bye.